This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Debts arising from the failure of a business is a common reason that someone may have to file a personal bankruptcy. That's not surprising. You borrow money personally to invest in a business, it doesn't work out, you're left with the debt, so you file bankruptcy. I've personally done hundreds of bankruptcies that were the result of a business failure. So what can you do to reduce the chance of a business failure? Or stated with a more positive perspective, what can you do to make your business a success? That's the question I'll answer on today's edition of Debt Free in 30, where I'll tell you the 6 skills I think you need to be successful in business. And to be clear here, I'm not just talking about someone who starts a corporation, rents a building, and hires 24 employees. Everything I say today will apply to those people, but I'm also talking about people who are self-employed, because like it or not, you are also a business person. I see it all the time. I see guys who work in construction, drywallers, framers, carpenters, plumbers, roofers. The company building the houses says, "We don't hire employees, only contractors." So they have no choice. They become self-employed to get the work. And at first, it's great. They get paid and there's no tax taken off their check, no CPP, no EI, no deductions. So their paycheck is bigger than it was when they were an employee. It's great. But then comes tax time and they realize they have a big problem because now they owe taxes and HST and CPP. And if they had their own employees, they may also owe workers' compensation and other deductions. And now they've got a big problem. And it's not just construction workers. There's lots of other jobs where you may become self-employed. Hairstylists, computer programmers, IT professionals, lawyers, Uber drivers, truck drivers. So today I'm going to tell you the 6 skills you need to have if you want to be successful in business. Let's get started. The first 3 skills you must have to be successful in business are your business must have a maker, a seller, and a scorekeeper. Now, a maker is probably the easiest to understand. If I want to start a business as a cabinet maker, well, I need to know how to make cabinets. So I have to be able to make the product that I'm selling or perform the service that I'm offering. If I want to open a fast food restaurant, I need to know how to cook hamburgers. That's the making part of it. But it's not just as simple as knowing how to do the thing that I'm going to sell. I know how to make hamburgers. I do them on my backyard barbecue all the time. That certainly doesn't make me qualified to operate a hamburger restaurant. I have to know how to do it at scale for lots of customers, and I have to know all the legal requirements to do it. What licenses do I need to operate that particular type of business? So there's more to it than just knowing how to do it. However, in my experience, being a maker is usually the least of your worries. Most people who go into business know how to do the thing that they're doing. Because, as I said in the introduction, the common scenario is I was working for someone else as a drywaller, for example, and I'm not getting the hours I want, I don't like the boss, my pay isn't consistent, so I decide to go out on my own. Well, I know how to do it because I've been doing it for a few years already. That's not the problem. The problem may be with some of the other things, like I said, legal requirements and so on, but usually being a maker isn't the issue that gets you into trouble. It's number 2 on the list. You also have to be a seller. And this is something that perhaps you don't realize when you're deciding whether you go into business for yourself or not. Because, okay, how hard can it be? I know how to make the thing. I assume customers will just find me. Well, it's not quite that simple. So let's say I want to be a hairstylist. I want to be a barber. I know how to cut hair. I've been doing it for a while, so I'm going to start my own shop. Well, how do I get customers? And yes, okay, maybe I've got a few customers from my old job that are willing to follow me to my new job, but do I have enough customers to make a go of it? How am I going to sell my product or service? This is something you've really got to think about. In my experience, people who are good as makers are not automatically also good as sellers. Perfect example, accountants. When Ted Michaelis and I started Hoyes Michaelis more than 20 years ago, we were and still are both chartered accountants, CPAs, licensed insolvency trustees, we are very good at we know how to do a consumer proposal in a bankruptcy, but because we are accountants, we're really good with numbers, that's the side of our brain that we use, we are not therefore automatically also good as salespeople. That's not our primary skill set. So how did we do it? Well, we've had to work very hard over the years to develop that side of it. And of course, we've also brought in outside experts to help us with marketing and other things related to that. So piece of advice number one, if you are good at one thing but not the other, make sure you are bringing in the expertise to help you. Maybe you have a partner who is good at something different than what you are good at. Maybe you have to have outside help or whatever. The point is, in order to run a successful business, you have to have a maker and you have to have a seller. You've got to be able to make the product and then you've got to be able to sell it. Item number 3, you've got to have a scorekeeper. Maker, seller, scorekeeper. Those are the top 3. Now again, I know this sounds kind of biased of me because I am an accountant. We are the ultimate scorekeepers. I believe every business must have someone performing the scorekeeping function. How do you know if you're making money or not? Now, in some businesses, it's pretty easy. If I'm an Uber Eats driver, and every day I drive and deliver food, well, I know how much gas I had to put in my car this morning, and I know how much I billed Uber, so I can see whether I made money or not. So I don't really need a huge accounting group to tell me if I'm making money. But most businesses are not like that because there is a time lag between the start and the end. There is a time lag from when you purchase the inputs to when you get paid for the outputs. So my example of a cabinet maker, I guess I have to go out and buy wood and machinery and supplies and that. And I do that in advance. And then when I actually provide the service, I get paid for it. Well, there's a time lag going on there. It's not as easy to tell whether I'm making money or not because I bought that machine and I'm going to use that machine for the next few years. Am I covering my costs or not? That's something a scorekeeper can tell you. And of course, it's more basic than that. You have to also make sure that you're filing all the necessary statutory returns that you're supposed to be filing. Are you registered for GST? Do you need to be? How often do you have to file a GST return and pay? What about taxes? Are you incorporated or not? Are you a sole proprietorship? Are you a partnership? How often do you have to remit money to Revenue Canada? What about employees? Do you have to take tax off them? CPP, EI, workers' comp, employers' health tax? How do all those things work? Well, that's the scorekeeping function. And in my experience, the number one place that business people get into trouble when they start out on their own is they are weak at the scorekeeping. Unless you're an accountant starting an accounting practice, you're going to be weak in that area. That's just typically the way it is. You know how to make it, maybe you can sell it as well, but how do you keep track of it? So, practical advice here. I believe before you start a business, it would be really good to sit down for an hour with an accountant and maybe even a lawyer to get the business set up the way it should be. Now, of course, an accountant can't do everything in an hour to completely set you up, but they can certainly tell you what problems you're likely to encounter. What kind of accounting system are you going to use? Well, it depends how complicated your business is. Maybe you can keep track of everything on a piece of paper because it's not that complicated. Maybe you need a more sophisticated accounting system. What receipts are you going to need at the end of the year when you do your taxes to make sure you're not paying too much in tax? That's a great conversation to have with an accountant before you set up your business so that you can be gathering all the necessary information up front. Should you incorporate or be a sole proprietor? Interesting question. There are advantages to incorporating, advantages to staying as a sole proprietor. Being a sole proprietor is exactly what it sounds like. It's just me, I go out there and do the work. By incorporating, there may be some advantages. You may get some tax advantages, you may get liability protection, but you're also paying for it. You've got to have somebody incorporate the company, you've got to file a separate set of corporate tax returns in addition to your personal tax returns. Does it make sense? I don't know. Depends on your business, how many employees you're going to have, how successful you think it's going to be. Those are the kind of things where you sit down in advance, pay the money to an accountant and a lawyer, ask them these questions, and then you can decide. The decision might be, hey, I'm not going to incorporate for a year or two. Fine. But at least you have a plan because you thought about it in advance. So, top 3 skills you need: maker, seller, scorekeeper. Number 4, money, or stated more correctly, I guess, capital. It costs money to operate most businesses. Now, some businesses are not very capital intensive. If you're an Uber Eats deliverer in downtown Toronto and you can use your bicycle to do it, well, the only thing you need is a bicycle. Doesn't cost very much, you probably already have one. Maybe you're going to go into business as a dog walker. Okay, again, doesn't take a whole lot of capital to do that. I mean, if you can walk through your neighborhood, pick up the dogs, take them for a walk, and walk them back off at home, you really don't need anything other than a pair of shoes and a coat to wear. And I guess a scoop and a doggy bucket. I don't know how it works. That's a very low capitally intensive business. But there are other businesses where it takes a lot more capital to be up and running. So I want to open a restaurant. Okay, well, that costs money. You're going to rent a place. Does it already have chairs and kitchen equipment and all the rest of it? Are you going to have to finance it yourself? I'm opening my haircutting place. Well, okay, that's not a hugely capital intensive business, but I still have to have chairs and sinks and scissors and all the supplies that go into it. And again, remember what we said about the scorekeeping function. You buy the stuff up front, the inputs, and you don't get paid to it until later. So I'm opening up my hamburger joint. Well, I have to buy hamburger meat and buns and all that sort of stuff. And I may buy those a few days in advance and then I sell them and then I get paid. Other businesses like my cabinet making shop, it may be 2 or 3 or 4 months between when I put the money out there to buy my supplies and actually get paid. How are you going to fund yourself in the meantime? Because when you're an employee, it's pretty easy. At the end of the week, I get a paycheck, off I go. But when you're in business, you have to front the money up front and then you get paid later. And what happens if your customers are a little late in paying or don't pay you? You have to have extra capital to get you through what you're doing. So I'm going to go into home renovations. That's the thing I'm going to do. I'm going to renovate people's basements. Well, there's some upfront costs. I've got to buy all my tools and compressors and machinery and whatever. And then, of course, I'm going to have to buy drywall and wood and whatever else I use in my business. Now, if you're a good business person, you're going to say to your customers, okay, I need an upfront deposit to cover the cost of my materials. But that may not cover everything. It's certainly not going to cover the capital cost of your machinery. What happens if they don't pay you on time? Even if they do pay you on time, so maybe it takes 30 days to do the job and you get paid 30 days later, but in the meantime, you're still paying your employees, buying your supplies and whatever. So you have to figure out how much capital is required to operate your business. And whatever number you come up with, double it. So if you do the math and you figure out, okay, well, each job I'm going to need to put about $5,000 worth into it, and it's maybe going to take 30 days to get paid. I might have a couple of jobs on the go at any one point in time, so I need $10,000 worth of capital. Well, you probably need $20,000 or more. Not having enough capital is a huge cause of business problems. I've seen lots of people over the years who come into me and their business is actually doing well. They've actually got customers, things are going well, but they don't have enough money to buy supplies, pay employees, and as a result, they go to very high interest lenders or they just can't get the work, and that gets themselves into trouble. So you want to work with your scorekeeper, your accountant, to come up with as detailed a projection as you can. And of course, it's a pure guess because you don't know exactly how things are going to pan out. But you will probably need more capital than you think. And it's not just putting money into the business, of course. You've got your own life to live. You've got to pay your own rent, buy your own groceries. If the business isn't generating anything up front, you've got to have money to live as well. So what's it going to cost to run the business? Do some detailed calculations. Make sure you have enough capital. That's number 4. So maker, seller, scorekeeper, and then having enough capital to make it work. Now, the last 2 on my list of the 6 things you need to operate a successful business aren't things you're going to see in a business textbook, but based on my experience, they're both very important. Number 5 is, in your business, you have to have a visionary. You have to have someone who can see the future. Okay, I get it. Nobody can really see the future, but you have to look at your business and ask yourself, how is my business likely to change in the future? How is my industry likely to change in the future? If you became an auto mechanic 20, 30 years ago, you're probably very good at fixing cars. What's going to happen 10 years from now when a lot of cars are electric instead of gas powered? How does that change what you do as a mechanic? Well, presumably you need a different set of skills. You need more computer skills, more electrical skills. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that. Some things will be the same. I assume brakes are always going to be brakes on a car, but the industry will change. If you want to start a company, a newspaper, I'm going to have a little local community newspaper. That'd be great. Report on local events in my town. Okay, fantastic. But paper newspapers they're just not like they used to be. When I was a kid growing up, we had a newspaper delivered to our house every day. How many people do you know who actually have a physical newspaper delivered every day? It's much rarer. Now, of course, we all have our iPads, our phones, whatever. That's where we get our news. That's a totally different business model than the way it used to be. So how is your industry likely to change? You want to be ready for it. Truck driving right now, and I'm recording this in 2019, is a very popular job. There's a shortage of truck drivers in Canada, the United States, all around the world. It's because it's hard work. You're away from home for a long period of time. A lot of people don't want to do it. It's a good business to be in today. But what's it going to be like 10 years ago? What if we actually figure out how to make self-driving vehicles? We're not there yet, but truck driving would be an obvious industry that would be severely impacted by that. Maybe we'll still need people to do the last mile. So someone to load up the truck, you push the button, the computer drives it for 100 miles, and then at the end of the trip, somebody gets in and drives it for the last mile and backs it into the loading dock. There's going to be a lot fewer jobs for truck drivers if we can perfect that technology. So is now the time to be starting a trucking company or becoming a self-employed truck driver? I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that over the last 30 years, I've done a lot of personal insolvencies, proposals, and bankruptcies for truck drivers. Self-employed truck drivers who end up having to bear the cost of operating their own truck, leasing it, buying it. Something goes wrong, it needs repairs, they're off the road for a week, they have to spend $10,000 to fix it. That's where having adequate capital comes in, but that's also where being a visionary and being able to see the future is very important, so you know what can potentially get you into trouble. Item number 6. The final item, the final skill, the final thing you need if you want to be successful in business is luck. Yep, luck. And this is not something, again, you're going to read in the textbooks, but it is a very important attribute. And unfortunately, it's not something you can just snap your fingers and create. I graduated from university in 1987 to become an accountant. And it was an excellent time to graduate because the economy was booming. There were lots of jobs. I could go work for any accounting firm I wanted to. If I had graduated 2 years earlier, there were a lot fewer jobs. If I had graduated and started my career 2 years later, same thing, a lot fewer jobs. My timing was perfect. Now that was, of course, completely luck. I didn't decide where I was born. Ted Michaelis and I started Hoyes Michaelis in 1999. A very lucky time to start because it gave us a few years to perfect what we were doing, figuring out how it all worked, to become a maker and a seller and a scorekeeper and have a vision and all those kind of things, raise the capital. In 2006, things slowed down a bit. The economy was doing well. There were fewer bankruptcies and proposals filed. So we took that opportunity to completely revamp all our technology, all new systems. And as a result, we were completely ready when the economy got bad in 2008, 2009, 10. We were completely ready. And we've been doing constant upgrades since then. So our timing was perfect. Had we started the business 2 or 3 years earlier or 2 or 3 years later, we probably would have missed the waves and would not have been as successful as we could have been. Timing is very important. Let me give you another example. And I'm getting this from the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Excellent book. I recommend you read it. He tells the story of Bill Gates, who everybody knows, one of the co-founders of Microsoft and perhaps one of the most successful entrepreneurs and business people in the history of the world. Bill Gates was born in 1955. That means he was in grade 8 in 1968. Now, those of you who can think back to what 1968 was like, we didn't have computers back then. We weren't carrying around smartphones and laptops. There were essentially no computers. Personal computers did not exist at that point. But Bill Gates went to a fairly high-end school, and the mothers at the school every year raised money that they then used for school programs. So in the year that Bill Gates was in grade 8, they raised $3,000 to buy essentially a big computer that was put in a basement room at the school. And that computer had a direct link up to a mainframe computer in Seattle. And so Bill Gates had the opportunity to go and use that computer and learn how to program. And so that when he got to high school, he already had some skills. He was able to continue using those. And every night, all weekend long, he was on computers programming. He had an advantage that very few other people had because personal computers didn't exist and there were no ways for young kids to get access to big computers. It just wasn't a thing. He was born at exactly the right time. If he had been born 2 or 3 years earlier or two or 3 years later, he would have missed the wave. He wouldn't have ended up being in a position to start Microsoft, and we all know what happened from there. Now, I'm not saying Bill Gates is successful because he was lucky. Obviously, he worked extremely hard. He was, working all night, all weekend. By the time he got to his second year at Harvard, he already had thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, probably tens of thousands of hours of computer programming experience, which is why he was able to drop out in year 2 of Harvard and start Microsoft, and the rest is history. He worked extremely hard, but he also had luck on his side. His timing was perfect. So why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because you could do the first 5 things right. You could be a great maker and seller and scorekeeper. You could have the capital you need. You could have the vision to see what's coming, but your timing may be off. Other things may just conspire against you. You may open up a fantastic restaurant, but 2 other people may open up great restaurants right beside you, and there isn't enough business, and one of you doesn't succeed. So if you don't succeed when you open your business, don't worry about it. Don't lose faith in it. Don't give up. Sometimes that's what happens. That's just sometimes how luck is. It's just the way it is. So, advice. How can you mitigate against that? Well, obviously working very hard was also very important for Bill Gates. He didn't just get lucky, he also worked hard, which supported the luck. But here's a couple of things I would recommend if you're thinking of starting a business and you want to reduce the chance of it failing. Number 1, start small. So let's say I want to open a landscaping company. I'm going to cut people's lawns and trim their hedges and do outside kind of yard work like that. Well, I could start big. I could go out and buy a couple of trucks and big lawn tractors and trailers and all the equipment. Or I could start small. I could find a few local people. I could cut their lawn, use my own lawnmower, throw it in the back of my pickup truck. Maybe I start out with just a few clients. Maybe I do it on the side. I do it evenings and weekends. I keep my regular job and see how it goes. And if I'm able to build up enough clients, well then I buy a truck to haul my stuff around in. And I buy a used truck, not a brand new one. And if things are going well, then I'll buy something bigger. Then I'll start hiring employees. I don't start big right off the bat. Starting small has a huge advantage. If you fail, if it doesn't work, you've only made a very small mistake. Maybe it cost me a couple of $1,000s to buy a couple of lawnmowers and some lawn trimmers. If it doesn't work, well, I've lost a couple of $1,000s. That's a lot better than going to the bank, borrowing $100,000, buying trucks and other equipment, because then if it works, I've got a $100,000 problem. So where possible, start small. If you can do it on the side as a side hustle to begin, if you can do it part-time, evenings, weekends, great. So I want to be in the haircutting business. Well, is it possible to do that, from my own house evenings and weekends till I build up enough clients to get my own shop? Now there are regulatory hurdles and you got to have licenses and all the rest of it. So in some cases it's not possible, and in some cases it is better to get the money and go big or go home. But in most cases, start small. At Hoyes Michaelis, we didn't start with 24 offices. We started with a small number, essentially, one staff person other than Ted and myself, and grew it from there. So that if it didn't work, the implications would be much, much less. We wouldn't lose a huge amount of money. Because in a lot of cases, a business isn't going to work, so you start another one, so you start another one, so you start another one. I think the stats are something like 4 out of 5 businesses don't last for 5 years. That's just the way it is. Okay, well, if you're going to fail quickly, fail small, so you can then start something else. That's advice number 1. Final piece of advice. if at all possible, it is a good idea to either have a mentor or a partner or somebody else who can help you through it. So if I want to start a landscaping company, it would be great to work for somebody else for a while and then perhaps learn from that person, or maybe there's somebody in my industry who's already retired and could mentor me, somebody I could go have a coffee with every couple of weeks, buy them lunch, ask them questions, get them some advice. Because somebody who's been doing it for years and years and years will have already figured out where not to make a mistake, and they can give me some pretty good advice so I can avoid it. So if you can have a partner or a mentor, that's an excellent way to do it. A partner is good because if you're really good as a maker, well then what you want is a partner who's a really good seller. So now you've got both skill sets, your chances of success are much higher. So there you go. Those are the top 6 things I think you need to be successful in business. A maker, a seller, a scorekeeper. You need access to capital, you need to have a vision of what's going to happen, and you need to have luck. Now, having all 6 of those things does not guarantee that you will be successful, but it reduces the chance of failure. And if you can keep your costs down, if you can have a mentor or a partner to help you through it, your chances of success go way up. That's what I've discovered anyways over the last 20, 30 years that I've been advising people who have gone through business failures. So that's my advice for today, and that's our show for today. My name is Doug Hoyes. That's Debt Free in 30. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.